Hallo zusammen! Next to different languages and the fact that they really affect how we perceive the world and how we express the world and relate to it pretty much, there are different social norms and cultural habits, so to speak, that make each culture and each country a bit special. So let's talk about a very typical German social rule today. The social rule I'm talking about today can be summed up in the common phrase, der Ältere bietet das Du an. Honestly, I think it's definitely one, if not the most typical German social rule there is, and for a specific reason. Even though there is no official phrase to describe and explain this behavior, we Germans usually refer to this by using the aforementioned sentence. Der Ältere bietet das Du an. It translates to something like, the older person offers the informal form of address, du. In the German language, we strongly distinguish between a formal and an informal form of address. The most common example would be Sie versus du, respectively siezen versus duzen. I'm not gonna go into too much detail right now though, because I've already made a whole lesson about that topic alone. You can watch it and find it by clicking the thumbnail at the end of this video. Awesome! To break it down real quick though, Sie is a common formal form of address, both in singular and in plural, and du is a common informal form of address in singular. The noun das Siezen, or respectively the related verb siezen, means to use the formal form of address Sie, and das Duzen, respectively the verb duzen, means to use the informal form of address du. Exemplary sentences could be: Sie haben da drüben was verloren. Du hast da drüben was verloren. In Germany, it's a common social rule to use the formal form of address when you're meeting a person for the first time, for instance, with the exception of kids or younger teenagers maybe. You wouldn't use Sie in those cases. For instance, if I meet another adult person for the first time, I'm gonna approach that person by using the formal form of address Sie. If that person I'm talking to is an elder or a visibly older person than me, it's up to that person to offer me the du, meaning the informal form of address. That's what Germans consider polite. A typical sentence that person might say to me could be, Sie können mich auch gerne duzen. You can very well approach or address me informally, with du, meaning by saying du instead of Sie. There is something like a little anecdote, a little German urban myth or story, mysterious tale, whatever, that goes, some politician some decades ago said something like, you can say you to me, to a fellow foreign politician, which very well makes sense if you'd say that in German, but it doesn't really make sense to say that in English, I'm afraid. But it's a quite hilarious anecdote and I wanted to mention it in this case. Some people say it was the former German president Heinrich Lübke talking to the Queen, while others say it might have been the former German Chancellor Helmut Kohl talking to Ronald Reagan back in the day. I guess we'll never know. So it's always the older person that's pretty much allowed to offer the informal form of address du in German. And if that person doesn't do or doesn't want to do that, that's totally fine as well. You can just stick to Sie then. By the way, as a personal advice, if you see a quite young person and you're not sure if it's like a teenager or a young adult, and you don't really know how to address that person, how to approach that person with either du or with Sie, it's always best to use Sie in situations of doubt, because you can't really go wrong with that. It shows you really try, you really care for the other person, and you just want to be polite and not rude. Of course, there are many other social rules in Germany, and many of them also exist in other countries and cultures. For instance, it's common to use or to shake the right hand when you're greeting someone. And even though this next one isn't limited to Germany or the German culture either, we actually have a quite interesting and popular saying that refers to this situation. Again, there is no official fixed expression that refers to this social norm, but Germans usually say, der Esel nennt sich immer zuerst. The donkey always mentions themselves first. Translated very literally. A less literal translation would be, only a donkey names himself first. There is no proper English equivalent to that particular German saying, I don't think, which makes it special, and that's why I wanted to include it in this video. It's an ironic saying, and that's pretty important because, similar to what it's like in English, it's way more polite to mention yourself last in a German sentence. And because doing that the other way around is considered quite rude, and for some reason, donkeys seem to be evaluated as being quite stupid animals, I don't know why, some German coined this term some decades ago. It's der Esel Singular, die Esel Plural, the donkey. Well, poor donkeys, I'd say. I don't actually know if they are considered rather stupid animals? Maybe some of you know that and can tell me in the comments if it's pretty much similar to how we perceive pigs usually as like dirty animals. That one is bullshit too, because pigs are pretty hygienic animals. If you know more about that, tell me in the comments, I'd really like to know. And also make sure to check out the Du versus Sie lesson I've just mentioned if you want to. Just click the thumbnail right here and well, thanks for watching. I'm your Vlog Dave, tschüss und bis zum nächsten Mal.